You know that person who can sit through an entire group conversation and barely say 10 words? Everyone else is jumping in, interrupting each other, telling stories, changing subjects, laughing over one another. And this person is just there, listening, watching, maybe smiling occasionally. Someone asks, "Why are you so quiet?" And suddenly the entire table is looking at them, which is probably the exact opposite of what they wanted. Then later, when they're alone with one person they actually trust, something strange happens. They talk. A lot. Maybe for 2 hours. So what changed? From the outside, people who don't talk much are often treated like a mystery that needs solving. They're called shy, awkward, antisocial, insecure, boring, or sometimes even rude. If they stay quiet during a meeting, people may assume they have nothing to contribute. If they don't join a conversation at a party, someone eventually tries to bring them out of their shell. But quietness isn't one personality type. Two people can both sit silently in the same room for completely different psychological reasons. One may be perfectly comfortable. The other may desperately want to speak and feel unable to. And understanding that difference explains a lot about people who don't talk much. The first explanation is probably the most familiar: personality. In personality psychology, introversion and extroversion exist on a continuum. Extroversion is associated with things like sociability, assertiveness, activity, and greater outward engagement. And research observing people in their actual daily lives has found that extroversion does show up in visible behaviors, including how socially active and verbally engaged people tend to be. But being lower in extroversion doesn't mean disliking people. That's an important distinction. Some quieter people genuinely enjoy conversation. They just don't feel the same urge to continuously participate in it. Imagine 4 people talking about something that happened at work. One person thinks of a related story and immediately tells it. Another person asks a question. Someone else makes a joke. The quieter person may have thoughts too. They simply don't experience every thought as something that needs to become sound. And that creates an interesting difference. Some people seem to discover what they think while talking. The conversation itself helps them develop the idea. Others seem more comfortable letting the thought develop internally first. They listen, connect pieces, decide whether they actually have something to add, and only then speak. Neither approach is automatically smarter. Neither is deeper. They're simply different styles of participating, which is why telling a quiet person, "You should talk more," can feel a little like telling someone who speaks constantly, "You should really keep more of those thoughts inside." Technically possible, not always necessary. And then there's the environment. Watch some quiet people in different situations and their personality seems to completely change. Put them at a crowded party with 12 people having 3 conversations at once and they barely speak. Put them in a quiet kitchen at midnight with their closest friend and suddenly they have opinions about childhood, relationships, whether consciousness could exist in a machine, and why the neighbor keeps putting that one chair outside. This matters because talkativeness isn't just about how much somebody likes people. It can also depend on context, familiarity, group size, conversational pace, and how psychologically safe the interaction feels. A fast group conversation rewards speed. You need to notice an opening, formulate your thought, and enter before someone else takes the space. For someone who naturally pauses before responding, the opening can disappear before they decide to use it. And research suggests that even tiny pauses affect how other people perceive us. In a series of experiments, psychologists Deming Wang and Ignacio Ziano found that people who responded more quickly were perceived as more extroverted, while slightly delayed responses could make someone appear more introverted. Think about how easily that can snowball. You pause. Someone assumes you don't want to talk, so they continue talking. Now there's even less room for you to enter. You become quieter, and everyone leaves thinking, "Wow, they really don't say much." Sometimes quietness is partly created by the conversation itself. But there's another layer. For some people, being quiet began much earlier. Psychologist Jerome Kagan spent decades studying what researchers call behavioral inhibition, a temperamental tendency to react cautiously to unfamiliar people, places, and situations. Some children walk into an unfamiliar room and begin exploring immediately. Others stop at the doorway. They watch first. They need time. Kagan's longitudinal research suggested that these differences can appear remarkably early, although temperament does not determine a person's entire future. So the child who watches the room before entering may become the adult who watches the conversation before joining. not because somebody damaged them, not because they secretly hate everyone. Their natural approach to novelty may simply be more cautious, but childhood can shape silence in another way too. Picture a child sitting at the dinner table. Every time they excitedly tell a story, someone interrupts. They say something unusual and everyone laughs. They share an opinion, and an adult immediately corrects them. Or maybe the household is unpredictable enough that saying the wrong thing can suddenly change the mood of the entire room. A child in an environment like that can learn a simple lesson. Watch first. Speak carefully. Over time, silence can become protective. Now they're 30. Someone asks what restaurant they want. Anything is fine. A manager asks whether they disagree with the plan. No, sounds good. Someone hurts their feelings. It's okay. They have words. They just developed a very strong filter between having a thought and allowing somebody else to hear it. And this is where quietness can become complicated. Because restraint has advantages. A person who doesn't immediately fill every silence may become good at observing before reacting. They may notice conversational dynamics other people miss. They may be selective about what they share. They may be comfortable without constant attention. But the same pattern has a cost. If you rarely express what you need, people can't reliably know what you need. If you never disagree, people may assume you agree. If you wait until you have the perfect sentence, the conversation may move on without you. And if you become known as the quiet one, other people may unintentionally reinforce the role. They stop asking. They speak for you. They assume you don't want to participate. Eventually, silence stops being something you occasionally choose and becomes something everyone expects from you. Workplaces make this especially visible. Meetings often reward the person who can think out loud quickly. Someone confidently says the first reasonable idea that enters their mind, and everyone knows they contributed. Meanwhile, somebody else may be sitting there building a more considered answer that arrives 3 minutes after the meeting has moved to another subject. That doesn't mean the second person had the better idea. But it does mean visibility and ability are not the same thing. Sometimes the world notices the person who communicates competence before the person who quietly possesses it. And there's a popular idea we should be careful with here, that quiet people are automatically amazing listeners. It sounds flattering. Research doesn't really support making that assumption. A recent series of studies examining introversion and listening found no general advantage for introverts. In some situations, more extroverted people were actually perceived as better listeners. Because listening is a skill. Silence is not proof that listening is happening. A quiet person might be carefully following every word. Or they might be mentally deciding what groceries to buy tomorrow. You really can't tell from the silence alone. And that brings us to the most important distinction in this entire conversation. There is a difference between choosing not to speak and feeling unable to speak. Imagine two people at the same party. Both are standing near the edge of the room. The first is relaxed. They speak occasionally, enjoy listening, have one good conversation, go home, and feel completely fine about the evening. The second spends the entire night rehearsing sentences internally. Say something. No, that sounds stupid. Maybe ask them a question. They'll think that's weird. Okay, now I've been quiet too long. If I suddenly talk, everyone will notice. From the outside, same behavior. Inside, completely different experience. Research on social anxiety has found differences in conversational behaviors such as speech, eye contact, and negative judgments about one's own social performance. And this is why introversion and social anxiety shouldn't be treated as interchangeable. An introverted person may think, I could talk, I just don't particularly want to. An anxious person may think, I really want to talk. I just can't stop worrying about what will happen if I do. One is often preference, the other can feel like restriction. And the useful question isn't, do I talk enough? It's, what is my silence doing for me? Does it feel peaceful? Does it give you space to think? Can you speak when something actually matters? Can you tell somebody no? Can you ask for what you need? Can you disagree without spending the next 6 hours replaying the conversation? If so, being quiet may simply be part of how you move through the world. You don't need to turn yourself into the loudest person in every room. But if silence repeatedly prevents relationships, keeps you invisible when you want to contribute, or leaves you feeling trapped inside conversations you wish you could join, then the goal isn't necessarily to become talkative. It may simply be to make your silence more voluntary, to practice saying the unfinished sentence, to give the opinion before you've polished it 17 times, to let yourself occupy a little more conversational space. Because sometimes the healthiest change for a quiet person isn't learning how to talk constantly. It's learning that speaking doesn't always have to feel dangerous. So think again about that person sitting quietly at the table while everyone else talks. Maybe they're shy. Maybe they're introverted. Maybe they're observing. Maybe they're anxious. Maybe they grew up learning to choose their words carefully, or maybe they're completely comfortable and simply don't have anything they feel like saying. Silence tells you surprisingly little about what is happening inside somebody. And perhaps that's the psychology of people who don't talk much in one sentence. The absence of words isn't the absence of a personality. Sometimes the quietest person in the room isn't waiting to become louder. They're simply waiting until they have something they actually want to say. If this felt familiar, tell me in the comments. Are you naturally quiet? Or do you become quiet only around certain people? And subscribe for more psychology like this.